February 28th, 1997, North Hollywood, Los Angeles. 9:17 in the morning. Two men walked into a Bank of America wearing ski masks and body armor. They carried fully automatic assault rifles, modified to fire armor-piercing rounds. What they didn't know was that this day would become the most violent gun battle in Los Angeles Police Department history. This is their story, from beginning to end, from planning to execution to failure. Larry Eugene Phillips Jr. was 26 years old. He worked in special effects for movies and television. That job gave him connections, knowledge, and access to things most people couldn't get. He knew how to acquire military-grade weapons. He knew how to find body armor. He knew how to acquire ammunition that was difficult to find in the civilian market. By all accounts, Phillips was intelligent, methodical, patient. He planned things carefully. He didn't just walk into situations. He prepared. He studied. He was dangerous not because he was impulsive, but because he was deliberate. Emil Matisarini was 30 years old. He was a computer repairman. Less is known about his motivations, but his role was clear. He was the tactical support. He was the getaway driver. He was the muscle when needed. He was committed to Phillips' plans. Together, they became known to Los Angeles police as the high-incident bandits. Not because they robbed a lot of banks, but because of the weapons they used and the violence they displayed. They were different from typical bank robbers. They were prepared for conflict. They expected to fight, and by 1997, they had a track record.
In June of 1995, Phillips and Matisarini ambushed a Brinks armored car in Winnetka, Los Angeles. This wasn't a bank robbery. This was a violent armored car heist. They attacked the vehicle with automatic weapons. They killed a guard named Herman Cook, just executed him. They seriously wounded another guard. They got away with the money and disappeared into the city. Police opened a murder investigation. The case was serious. The violence was escalating. Then in May 1996, nearly a year later, Phillips and Matisarini made their move into bank robberies.
They stormed into a Bank of America in Van Nuys, Los Angeles. Both men armed with automatic weapons. They ordered everyone down. They had this down to a science. 8 minutes later, they left with $755,048 in cash. The LAPD investigated. They had clear footage. They knew Phillips and Matisarini were behind it. But the men disappeared again. Less than a month later, on May 31st, 1996, they hit another Bank of America, this time in a different location. Same methodology, automatic weapons, quick in and out. They left with $794,200. Two bank tellers were injured during this robbery. But here's what's important. In this May 31st robbery, they expected $2 million to be there. They had planned for $2 million based on their intelligence about cash deliveries. But new security measures had been implemented. A significant portion of that money had been collected 2 days earlier. So they only got about $800,000 instead of the $2 million they expected. The robbery succeeded. They got away, but the plan had failed. Their intelligence was wrong. The money wasn't where they thought it would be. This would become prophetic, because 9 months later, on February 28, 1997, Phillips and Matisarini would find themselves in the exact same situation, planning a robbery based on intelligence that was no longer accurate, expecting money that wouldn't be there. And when they discovered the discrepancy, everything would unravel. Phillips had been watching the Bank of America on Laurel Canyon Boulevard in North Hollywood for months. He would stake it out. He would time the armored car deliveries. He would observe the routines. He would note when the most cash arrived. Based on the delivery schedule, Phillips believed that on February 28, 1997, there would be approximately $750,000 in the vault. That was his target number, $750,000. That was enough money to make this worth the risk. Matisarini was involved in the surveillance too. They worked together. They synchronized their watches. They planned exit routes. They discussed what would happen if police showed up. They thought through contingencies. But there was one contingency they didn't account for. What if the delivery schedule changed? What if the money wasn't there? Phillips acquired weapons specifically for this job. He didn't use handguns like typical bank robbers. He acquired a Beretta 92 FS pistol, backup weapon, a semi-automatic HK91 rifle, 2 Norinco Type 56S rifles, semi-automatic, 1 Norinco Type 56S1 rifle, fully automatic, 1 Bushmaster XM15 dissipator rifle, fully automatic. These weren't civilian weapons. These were military-grade firearms. Some were modified to be fully automatic when they're normally semi-automatic. The night before, Phillips told someone close to him something revealing. He said if this robbery didn't go the way he planned, he would go out in a blaze of glory. Those were his words. He was already prepared mentally for the possibility that this might not end well, that the police might show up, and that he might not leave alive. He was right to prepare for that possibility. He just didn't know how right.
February 28, 1997, early morning. Phillips and Matisareanu took their muscle relaxants. They synchronized their watches. They checked their weapons one more time. Magazines loaded, ammunition secured, armor fitted. At 9:17 a.m., they arrived at the Bank of America on Laurel Canyon Boulevard. They parked, they got out of the car, they walked toward the entrance. Phillips and Matisareanu entered the bank wearing ski masks and carrying assault rifles. One of them fired automatic weapons into the ceiling. The sound was deafening. People screamed. Customers hit the ground. Tellers froze. "This is a robbery," they yelled. One witness later described seeing a big guy all in black like armor with a gun. The ski mask hid their faces. The body armor made them look inhuman. Now, they had access to the tellers and the vault. They forced tellers to fill bags with money from the cash drawers. They were fast, they were efficient. Everything was going according to plan. Then they approached the vault, the main vault, where the largest amounts of money would be stored. They fired at the vault door. The armor-piercing rounds damaged it. They couldn't open it completely, but they could see inside. They could access some of the cash from the vault. And this is where things went wrong.
Matisareanu looked at the amount of cash available. He looked at the bags. He did the math. This wasn't $750,000. This wasn't even close to $750,000. This was significantly less. Maybe half. Maybe even less than half. The money he was expecting wasn't there. Matisareanu became enraged. He was furious. All this planning, all this preparation, all this risk, and the payoff was going to be a fraction of what they expected. They gathered what they could. They got approximately $303,305 in total. They exited the bank and headed toward their getaway vehicle. They had no idea that police were already responding. 2 LAPD officers on patrol had spotted them entering the bank. They saw 2 men wearing ski masks and carrying military-grade rifles. They radioed it in immediately. Within minutes, LAPD officers began arriving at the Bank of America. Some arrived in patrol cars, some arrived on foot. They established a perimeter around the building. They were trained for armed robberies. They had protocols. They had done this before. They had never done this before. Not like this. Not with suspects carrying the weapons that Phillips and Matisareanu were carrying. Phillips and Matisareanu exited the bank. They immediately saw police. They saw officers positioning themselves around the bank and the surrounding area. They saw patrol cars. They saw firearms. And they made a decision. They would fight. Phillips began firing at officers immediately. He didn't hesitate. He didn't negotiate. He didn't try to escape peacefully. He opened fire with his assault rifle, aiming at police officers. Matisareanu moved toward their getaway vehicle, but officers had positioned themselves to prevent escape. The car was surrounded or blocked. Matisareanu couldn't get to it easily, so instead of getting in the vehicle, he abandoned it and took cover, continuing to fire at police. Now the 2 robbers were separated, Phillips on foot in the parking lot and surrounding area, Matisareanu taking cover near the bank and the blocked vehicle. What happened over the next 44 minutes was unprecedented in Los Angeles police history. For 44 minutes, 2 men with military weapons engaged in continuous gunfire with LAPD officers. Not sporadic exchanges, continuous gunfire. Nearly 2,000 rounds would be fired before it was over. A 77-year-old man was shot and injured by gunfire. Others were hit by shrapnel or collateral fire. A woman was struck.
A man was struck. The bullets were going everywhere, and civilians were in the path. But miraculously, no civilians were killed. Phillips' rifle jammed at one point. The weapon malfunctioned. In that moment, he should have surrendered. He should have realized it was over. But instead, he pulled out his Beretta 9mm pistol and kept firing. He was not going to quit. An officer managed to shoot Phillips in the hand. He was bleeding. He was exhausted. He was out of options. He was surrounded. There was no escape. Phillips realized it. He raised the Beretta to his chin. He pulled the trigger. He took his own life right there in the street. Matisareanu continued fighting a bit longer. SWAT members were closing in. They had him surrounded. He tried one last desperate move. He tried to hijack a civilian's Jeep. He rushed toward it, but the owner of the Jeep, showing incredible presence of mind, removed the keys from the vehicle before Matisareanu could get in it. The Jeep was useless to him now. Matisareanu took cover again. SWAT officers were shooting at him from multiple angles. They fired below his position, targeting his legs, which weren't covered by body armor. The rounds hit. Matisareanu went down. He was bleeding. He was severely injured. He tried to get up. He tried to continue fighting, but it was over. Matisareanu attempted to surrender, but the injuries were too severe. Blood loss was too great. He lay in the street, and over the next few minutes, he died from trauma and blood loss. At 10:01 a.m., the shootout ended. 44 minutes after it began. Both robbers dead. Two men who had planned this robbery, who had acquired military weapons, who had trained for this moment. Both were dead. When the gunfire stopped, North Hollywood looked like a war zone. Streets were damaged. Buildings were shot up. Windows were shattered. Vehicles were destroyed. Storefronts were riddled with bullet holes. The police department had to secure the area. They had to do a complete search to make sure there were no other suspects. They had to collect evidence. They had to investigate every aspect of the shooting. The final count? 2 robbers killed, Phillips and Matisareanu. 12 police officers injured. 8 civilians injured. 0 civilians killed. Nearly 2,000 rounds of ammunition fired. $303,305 stolen. They got away with less than half of what they expected. Millions of dollars in property damage. The robbery failed. Completely. They didn't get the money they wanted. They didn't escape. And critically, the incident exposed a fundamental weakness in American law enforcement. The LAPD officers were completely outgunned. Their weapons were inadequate. Their training hadn't prepared them for this scenario. Their equipment was insufficient. If the robbers had been more disciplined, if they hadn't made tactical mistakes, if Matisareanu hadn't lost his temper in the vault, if they had executed their escape plan more effectively, this could have ended differently. The robbers could have escaped. Officers could have been killed. This realization spread throughout law enforcement. If it happened in Los Angeles, it could happen anywhere. If 2 robbers could outgun an entire police department, then the system itself needed to change. Sometimes the worst disasters come from careful planning that unravels on execution. Sometimes the best laid plans fail because of changing circumstances beyond your control. Sometimes the decision to fight instead of surrender leads to your own demise. And sometimes one failed robbery can change an entire nation's approach to law enforcement and safety. This is the North Hollywood Shootout, a battle that changed America.
Well, Kyle, right now this situation that we've been watching unfold has pretty much finished right now. They have a few PD officers that are still here on the scene, of course, to attend to the suspect. I think what we're going to do now is we're going to maybe head back over to the bank because it still seems that there's police activity going on back there. And as a matter of fact, I think that these SWAT officers that we saw take this suspect into custody, as a matter of fact, come over here and show such a strong force of firepower that the suspect was unwilling to take it to its final conclusion, so to speak. So he surrendered under those circumstances. Now I think that those officers have been dispatched back to the bank area, and let's see if we can go back over here and just get a glimpse on what the activity is over at the bank. As I said, it was about 4 or 5 blocks, and of course there it is. There's the Bank of America, where of course the situation is still unfolding.